You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you'll find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Before we dive into the life of Marcus Aurelius, pause for a moment and think about these words. They come from a man who commanded the world's most powerful empire, who had enemies at his disposal, unimaginable wealth, and the authority to make life and death decisions. Yet he believed true power was not in ruling millions, but in ruling himself. History is not just history, it's a mirror. It forces us to ask, am I in control of my life? Or am I a slave to my thoughts, my emotions, and my circumstances? Today we're going to the journey into the life of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who became the ultimate example of philosophy in action. His life was not a fairy tale, it was a battlefield of political challenges, personal tragedies, and endless wars. And yet, from this battlefield came one of the most beautiful philosophies the world has ever known: Stoicism. A boy destined for greatness, but raised in simplicity. Marcus Aurelius was born on April 26, 121 CE in Rome. His birth name was Marcus Aurelius Verus. He came from a wealthy and politically powerful family. His father died when Marcus was just 3 years old, and he was raised by his mother, Domitia Lucida, and his grandfather. Unlike many privileged Roman boys, Marcus was drawn to simplicity and discipline from an early age. He was nicknamed Vercinus, the most truthful, by Emperor Hadrian himself, a reflection of his character even as a boy. He didn't dress in flashy clothes or seek the pleasure of Rome's elite. Instead, he wore a simple cloak, preferred plain food, and even as a child, trained himself to endure discomfort. This was the seed of his Stoic character. Mentorship by the wise, the making of a philosopher. Fate placed Marcus under guidance of some of the greatest minds of his time. Emperor Hadrian saw something special in him and arranged for him to be trained by philosophers, grammarians. One of his most important teachers was Junius Rusticus, the man who introduced Marcus to the writing of Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who had once been a slave. Epictetus' teachings became a foundation for Marcus' own philosophy. That life is not about what happens to us, but how we respond to it. By his late teens, Marcus was already a devoted student of philosophy. He slept on the floor, practiced self control, and reflected daily on virtue, justice, and wisdom. But destiny had plans that would test these ideals on the grandest stage. Adopted by an emperor, the path to power. Antonius Pius adopted Marcus as his son and heir on the condition that Marcus marry Antonius' daughter, Faustina. From then on, Marcus was groomed to rule. For over 2 decades, he learned the art of governance under Antonius Pius, observing his patience, restraint, and fairness. Marcus admired him deeply and later wrote in Meditations about the virtues he learned from his adoptive father: calmness under pressure, fairness in judgment, and the ability to work tirelessly for the good of others. The philosopher becomes the emperor. In 161 CE, when Antonius Pius died, Marcus Aurelius became emperor. He chose to share power with his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, an unusual decision in Roman politics, showing Marcus humility, and desire for harmony rather than absolute control. His reign, however, was not a time of peace. The empire was immediately thrown into crisis. Wars in the east against the Parthian Empire, the Antony Plug that killed millions, and invasions from Germanic tribes along the northern borders. A life of war and responsibility. The image of Marcus Aurelius as a serene philosopher writing in his study is only half the truth. Much of his reign was spent on military campaigns, often in harsh and freezing conditions along the Danube frontier. It was during these campaigns, living in tents, surrounded by soldiers, far from Rome's luxury, that Marcus wrote the private notes that would become meditations. These writings were not meant for anyone else's eyes. They were reminders to himself to stay virtuous, patient, and focused amidst the chaos of leadership. Although he had some personal struggles and tragedies while leading armies and ruling an empire, Marcus faced deep personal pain. He and Faustina had 13 children, but only a few survived to adulthood. The constant loss of his children was a heavy emotional burden, yet it deepened his stoic acceptance of life's impermanence. He also had to face betrayal from within his own family and political circle. Even his co-emperor, Lucius Verus, died suddenly, leaving Marcus to carry the full weight of empire alone. The meditation, philosophy in action. Meditation is perhaps the most remarkable legacy of Marcus Aurelius. It is not a book of theory, but of practice, a diary of man holding himself accountable to the highest standards, even as the world tested him at every turn. In it, he reminds himself to focus only on what is within his control, to accept death and change as part of nature, to serve others selflessly because we are all part of the same human community, to remain humble even in the face of absolute power. The final years. In 180 CE, while still on campaign against the northern tribes, Marcus Aurelius fell ill. He knew his death was near. His final concern was to ensure a smooth succession for his son, Odos. Though history would later judge Commodus harshly for his reckless rule, Marcus Aurelius died on March 17, 180 CE, in Vienna, or possibly Serbia. He was 58 years old. The Roman Senate defied him, a common honor for emperors. But his true immortality came from his words, which have survived for nearly 2,000 years. The legacy. Why Marcus Aurelius matters today. Marcus Aurelius is remembered not just as a ruler, but as the embodiment of Stoic philosophy. He lived what he preached: humility, discipline, compassion, and resilience. His life teaches us that leadership is not about domination, but about service. That power means nothing if you cannot master yourself. And that when in the face of pain, loss, and uncertainty, you can choose virtue over bitterness. He reminds us, and this might be the most important lesson, that you do not need to control the world to be free. You only need to control your mind. So as you listen to these words, remember that you and Marcus Aurelius are separated by centuries, but cultures, by circumstances, but not by the human condition. You face challenges, you face uncertainty, you faced loss, just as he did. The question is, will you let the world control you? Will you, like the philosopher king, find strength within? The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Peace and love, Hamza.